Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We heard the PM's speech yesterday highlighting what's happened as far as the Hindutva movement that we can call now as India's agenda having been exposed from the killing in Canada. We've now, as far as the world is concerned, we've also seen the real face of India being exposed in all over the world at this time. We also saw the statement by the Prime Minister. We also saw the statement by Jilani Saab on this, particularly as far as the Hindutva agenda of India with regard to Pakistan. We saw it seems to be an extension of what Pakistan has always been putting forward to the world to see. As far as an extension of what happened with Kulbhushan Yadav is concerned, we'll be talking about the ramifications of this in the international scene as far as the world is concerned. Are we going to see the world react now to what's happened? Are we going to see the kind of reaction that the world needs to take? The ramifications of this on the world and on the region generally. When a country like India is undertaking such activities, it's taking part in this kind of terrorism, what kind of effects it will have for the world and indeed particularly for our region, and what kind of a reaction can we expect? The Prime Minister also said that of course the UN Secretary General has also been taken into confidence into what Pakistan and of course now the world sees as India's true colors. All of that today on Perspective. I have with me Maleeha Lodhi, who is a former Pakistani ambassador at the UN. We also have with us Dr. Shabana Fayyaz, who is an IR expert. Thank you for being with us today. We have with us Brigadier Retired Waqar Hassan Khan. Thank you for joining us today. Maleeha, overall we are looking at what's happened, the killing, its ramifications, its spillover effect. As a seasoned diplomat of so much experience, how do you see this? How, in the world and also the region particularly for Pakistan?
Well, I think the most obvious fact is that India is in deep trouble. I think India, which was celebrating the fact that its claim rather, that it had joined the Big Power League after it hosted the G20 summit, I mean, all of that seems to have been eroded or nullified. I think the kind of serious allegations that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has leveled, and he reiterated these at the UN, and now we also know that he has more than just concrete evidence. They've got the kind of evidence that India has to answer the questions that have been raised. I think the fact that they have briefed the G7 countries, the United States is standing behind them on this issue, so is the UK, so is Australia. So what we're looking at is India's international position and international credibility facing a huge setback right now. And I think they will have to really respond to the demands now that are being made, that they must cooperate in the investigation, and the world wants answers. I think if you look at the major Western newspapers or the media, you'll see there's been a spate of editorials that again have critiqued India for what it's done, and also asked India to respond to the demand for cooperation in the investigation. So I think, for us in Pakistan, this doesn't come as a surprise. We know what India has been doing over the decades. We know how it has carried out assassinations in other countries. But this time round, the fact that a member of the G7, Canada, a widely respected country in the international community, is voicing the same kind of allegation against India that Pakistan has long talked about, I think that does mean that India is in deep trouble.
Even, as far as we've been saying for a while, and I think that, a little while ago we spoke to you about this also, as far as India is concerned, its position in the world, saying that India is in trouble, to quote you, and the fact that, their position as a market because of their economic position, whatever one may call it, how far do you think that's going to take a dent? The image of a free India, the image of, an India which is all okay with all minorities, that, India has made a lot of effort to promote, that they've made a lot of effort to camouflage the realities of what's happening. Is it going to be sufficient to make the kind of dent that Pakistan has been talking about with evidence? If you look at Kulbhushan Yadav, there have been numerous cases with evidence also. We've also sent dossiers, and this now, like you said, a country like Canada echoing essentially what Pakistan has been saying. How much of an effect do you think it's going to have for India?
Well, I think it's a little premature to try to forecast what this might mean for India in the medium to long term. I think you're right in raising the question about India's, attractive market and the fact that India is an economically strong part. There's no doubt about that. And that reality may well kick in after a while. After all, in a way, economy trumps everything else. That's the reality that we have to live with in the world. But for now, at least, I think the situation that India faces is a very serious one. Because remember, Prime Minister Modi was also trying to project himself as this international leader, statesman, what have you, because of the upcoming elections in India, which, as you know, are next year. Now, of course, elections are never fought on foreign policy in most countries. But in India, we may in fact see one impact of this in terms of more intense Pakistan bashing, because that for the BJP does seem to get them votes. So they may want to, at the domestic front, try to deflect attention away from this huge setback that India has faced by trying to focus on their usual, pre-election gimmick, if you like, or pre-election politics, where they begin to target Pakistan, and engage in a lot of Pakistan bashing. That's happened by the BJP. It has happened before every election. And Modi is under pressure domestically. So, we have to keep in mind both the overall international situation as well as the situation within India to see how far, as you, rightly asked that question, how far this damage to Indian credibility, how long will it last?
Maleeha, legally speaking, in the international arena, as far as our case on Kulbhushan Yadav was concerned, is this the right time for us to perhaps, this is a case in point of what India is capable of, the Hindutva agenda, of how it interferes in other countries. And, is this the right time for us to perhaps take that case forward as another example of what India is capable of doing, and, the fact that nothing really came out of it for Pakistan?
Well, I think, again, you asked a good question, but I think we've done whatever we can on that issue. And let this play out between the big powers in India. And why should we get in the way of the big powers really coming down hard on India and asking Indians the questions that they're asking on this political assassination that's been carried out. But I do think that there is another aspect that your question raises, which is, can we do something now, taking advantage of this changed international climate? For now, it may not last very long. Can we do something on Kashmir? And I am a great advocate that, I don't think this government can do anything because, it's an interim government. But I think we should be ready. Moment the elected government comes in, I think we should take advantage of the fact that India is on the back foot diplomatically on the international arena, and we should try to raise the issue of Kashmir by moving a resolution in the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, something we've never done, something that we should do. I've long been an advocate of this. So, countries have to be nimble in responding to international development. If you just sit back and not do anything, well, then an opportunity passes by. But I think on the issue of the, assassination of the Sikh, that's something that I would prefer our government, it said whatever it said, but I would prefer our government to do something much more substantive on the Kashmir front, because I think there is an opportunity, there is some space there. At least we should test it. We should test the fact whether we have enough support amongst 47 members of the Human Rights Council. That's not a very large group, if we can't even mobilize support among 47 countries, then we really need to go back and revisit our foreign policy.
Right, fair enough. Thank you so much for your time, Maleeha. Thank you for being with us. We're going to be taking a short break, after which we'll come back and talk about the Hindutva agenda as far as the Modi government is concerned and what it means for our region particularly. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm going to go to Dr. Shabana. Dr. Shabana, you heard what Maleeha Lodhi said. As far as the region particularly is concerned, we've been for a while telling the world that this is a volatile region with an enemy like, India across the border, or a neighbor like India, whatever we want to call it. And then there's Afghanistan. Overall, as far as the region is concerned, this kind of interference again illustrates what India is capable of doing in other countries in terms of interference. And Canada is not India's neighbor. I'm saying, if you look at the geostrategic position overall. In terms of how this plays out for India with the background of the G20, with the background of trying to paint India a certain way, like you've seen, we've seen for a while Modi do. How long is it going to take? How long do you think, again, the concern is that it might evaporate, it might recede. And how long, and what can we do to sort of make sure that this has an effect that is tangible, that is long lasting, and that echoes our own stance on what we've been saying as far as India is concerned?
To begin with, Mahrukh, it's a very pertinent question. I must say that this is not something new that India has been doing. Apart from us in South Asia, there has been many episodes of the Indians' reckless intelligence agencies maneuvering in other parts, whether it's been Nepal or other parts of that, even during the Bangladesh earlier part as well. So the differences have always been doing what they have been doing indirectly through proxy warfare, either in Afghanistan, we all know that, and it is indirectly through the other, even there are reports that other, parts of the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan are also being supported logistically by other elements and tracing back to that. So this is one thing. Coming to the Canadian case, and especially the Sikh Khalistan movement, that is not something new. It goes back into the 50s and 60s and later on, even earlier than that. So this is something that Canada has been a home to the Khalistan peace lover Sikhs, and they have been doing the referendum. This is something very important because I think 3 weeks earlier, the referendum movement was being held. It is the second or third time in Canada, and there was a big, criticism from the Indian side on that. So they were, because it was flashed globally, and and it has become a very annual sort of event for the peace and for the right to be recognized as an indigenous group. So that was, maybe it was a reaction to that. They wanted to tell the other parts or other countries that look, there is a limit to what we are going to tolerate, and this in fact shows the very, I won't say it is of a Hinduism to do, it is more of the aggressive posture of using the religion by the part of the, the BJP government that is housed in Delhi to further its blatant and aggressive agenda around the world.
We've been for a time saying, I want to include Brigadier Sahib in this conversation also, but we've been for a time saying that what's happening to Muslims in Kashmir is going to have a spillover effect. We've also seen what's happening in Punjab in India at this time, and the spillover effect is, now it's happening, it's happened in Canada. So for the world to recognize the potential of the kind of damage that India is capable for, Is it going to be, the UN resolution that Maleeha talked about? Is it what are the logical next steps for Pakistan, in your opinion?
Before we come to Pakistan, just the background. I think if you look at the suppression of dissenting voices from I think the day one, BJP's term starting in 2014, inside India they have been doing it.
Yeah.
Like Gauri Lankesh was murdered, all the liberal was, Professor Dabulkar, Professor Pansare. And so it was, although a lot of human rights organizations raised the voice, Human Rights Watch, then you have Genocide Watch has already said that they are at the 9.5th stage. You have 10 stages and they are actually in the state of denial. But unfortunately, I would say it was Western hypocrisy that any time there was suppression of Muslims, there was no reaction. So it's the first time it's now happening outside. There was a murder of Avtar Khanda in UK also. He was poisoned, but UK government kept quiet. This was, I think, a few months back. And then you have, Hardeep Singh Najjar, and then another Sikh activist, Sukhdev Singh. So it means that I think the critical thing is that now state is involved, and if Five Eyes picks it up. Five Eyes is not, just there are 21 intelligence agencies belonging to UK, US, New Zealand, Canada, and Australia. So all English speaking. And I think they have very high tech capability for eavesdropping, for signal intelligence. And I'm sure when US, National Security Advisor Sullivan, followed by I think their Foreign Secretary, Secretary of State has stated that they stand with Canada, it means there is a proof. I think critical thing is that now you have Ministry of External Affairs involved because it was happening from the embassy. You have NSA's office involved, Ajit Doval, because it was being done by, let's say, Research Analysis Wing or NIA. And if these two ministries are involved, so Modi Saab is involved. So it becomes, I think, very, very difficult position for India. The way Canadian Prime Minister is, I think, highlighted. I'm sure he has 100% proof. And now you'll find leakage of information for Five Eyes. You'll find articles coming from Australia, UK. So I think it's a huge case. And I think Dr. Maleeha mentioned that this is the time to now join the international community and resonate and try to highlight that we have been doing it, or telling the international community for the last 2 decades. But nobody listened to it, but now it is happening. The other thing is, I think, pushback from within India. We have to see, like Khalistan movement, I think, is going to pick up. Now they're targeting their rappers. The Sikh rappers in Canada, their shows have been cancelled in India. You have pushback coming from northeast and southern India, especially from Tamil Nadu. You had M.K. Stalin's son saying that we don't need this Sanatan Dharma. So I think there will be a lot of pressure on Modi. And I think Pakistan, I think, should be looking at taking it to FATF, because there were definitely terror financing to Canada and then to ICC, which is basically a criminal case. So I feel that time is ripe. It's a good time, and then it happened just before UNGA. So it becomes very, very critical for diplomacy, information domain, as well as think tanks to talk about it.
Let me go to Najm Us Saqib Sahib, he's a former ambassador. Najm Us Saqib Sahib, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Mahrukh.
We've been talking about this for a while earlier on also, and with you also, about what India is doing and our efforts to highlight what's happening in Kashmir, and the fact that the world continues to look the other way. This is one of those instances when, again, we can now sit back and see this resonate and what India is doing all over the world. But again, my question is it going to be something that is going to have a lasting effect? And what do we do? What are the next steps for Pakistan to make sure that this has a lasting impact on what India is doing in Kashmir, what India is doing to minorities within its own borders also?
Let me take the last part of your question first. Pakistan has to tread very carefully on this ground because it's a very tricky and slippery ground. Why I'm saying that? If you talk about Khalistan movement and Hardeep Singh Najjar and, how this movement started and Pakistan, how does Pakistan feel, etc., we are going to fall into the trap. Why? Because tomorrow India is going to say that, look, Khalistan movement is a separatist movement, it's a terrorist movement, and Pakistan is sponsoring terrorism, etc., etc. To begin with, I must clarify here that Pakistan has got, as a policy matter, Pakistan has got nothing to do with the Khalistan movement. So we have to be extremely careful when we talk about this particular aspect. The other part, for instance, that it was a Canadian national, it was very, unequivocally, very clearly, Justin Trudeau said that it was a Canadian national has been assassinated. So if a Canadian national has been assassinated, and he never mentioned Khalistan and all that, how can he mention that? So he was careful in his words when he said that it's a Canadian national and it is a matter between now Canada and India. Let them sort it out, between themselves. As far as Pakistan is concerned, I am not surprised, by this because it has been happening for decades. We are the victim of Indian state-sponsored terrorism. And we have presented dossiers, ISPR, Foreign Office, multiple times to the United Nations, to various key, countries of the world that, look, this is what India is doing. And in doing that, we just didn't say that this is what we feel. We provided conclusive proofs. Pakistan and I and you, we don't have to do anything. Let India deal with this cat which it has held, from its tail. Why it is doing this, why India has gone to a foreign soil and all that. I'll just take a minute to just point out certain pointers and indicators. One is that India overestimating itself and its present, stature and position in the Committee of Nations. Just because, we have been on the moon now, on the last part of the moon where nobody has gone there, that the Bengaluru is doing this in technology, that we are, when Joe Biden came for the G20 meeting, so we sent a ministerial level person there so that we could tell them that, look, we are equals. And of course, the Indo-Pacific, politics and all that, and India's specified role specified by the West. And include into it the hosting of a rotatory, usual kind of a G20 summit and projecting it as a great diplomatic success and all that. And then, there are other factors also, which somehow India started feeling. And don't forget the next year's general election in India. All these factors somehow, told India that it can equate itself with China, if not anyone else. And it can now rub shoulders in that P5 and it can become a permanent member of, the United Nations Security Council, etc., etc. In doing all that, I think Jaishankar did some kind of miscalculation. And I will not be shocked and surprised if there is a dispute right now between RAW and the Foreign Office in New Delhi. And Mr. Duval and Mr. Jaishankar, they must be talking to each other now that how to deal with this animal which is in front of us, and just before the United Nations General Assembly. Now look, how is it going to take place? I have no idea. What I can see is that as in the case of Ukraine, for instance, nobody has actually attacked Russia from Europe or from NATO or from United States. But a dent has been, done to India's political, geopolitical particularly, and, diplomatic image that it wanted to portray to the world. And there are serious questions now being asked in Washington, specifically in Australia, in UK, New Zealand, etc., that this, they are weighing it. India's role as a policeman in South Asia, China containment, and India's, presumed role, and then this kind of thing happening in an ally's soil. And you must remember that Canada, to some, I've lived in Canada, I know that many people even, in Canada, they somehow unconsciously think that Canada is one of the states of the United States of America. So this is now, and today's statement, which has come from Washington, saying that India must cooperate. This is the third time that the United States has, told India, asked India, urged India that they must cooperate with Canada in concluding this ongoing investigation. What does it mean? It means that let the proofs, conclusive proofs come out, and then we will see how are we going to react. So I see India in trouble, number one. I see India in problem for many years because this is going to haunt, India for a long time. Then thirdly, I see strained relations between Canada and particularly the trade relations between Canada and India. And then, of course, the world, somehow has a tendency to forget about such things because there are other developments taking place. For the time being, I would say that India is in trouble, in hot waters, and it will take a little while before it realizes its actual position, its Hindutva policies, its RSS-driven, all these things, and the fallout effect. But that I don't see until the end of next year. Let's see what kind of government comes in New Delhi now.
Fair enough. Thank you for being with us, Ambassador Saab. Thank you for joining us. Dr. Shabana, what about the region? What about us for, in the sense that the next step, one of the things Maleeha said was, she said, move a resolution in the UN. That may be our next step. Do you think it's going to, have it's going to have a ripple effect? What Brigadier Saab is saying, he's saying other things will surface also. Within India, do you think it's going to, of course, Modi himself, his popularity, his policies are also, do you think at this time being questioned? Because, with as far as the BJP is concerned, as far as their extremist agenda, all of those things must at this time be a source of at least, a question for the literate in the country at least, and overall his popularity.
After if you follow the different trends that are in social media from the Indian sides and also in the newspaper, there is a split opinion on that. On the one side, it has hardened even the academia posture, directly attacking the Muslims. Calling them by names and, disregarding their respects and so forth. And on the other side, it is also has upped the agenda of the Congress party that has always been advocating for an inclusive foreign policy and inclusive politics. So it is going hand in hand. But at the moment, if you look into this matter is going to be a big matter. But on the same trend, there is also a push from the social media and others that is also bashing Pakistan. Look what they have highlighted. How come they have highlighted this issue? So this sort of the narrative it is playing at different levels. This is within India that I see at the moment.
So you think it's maybe it's time for us to take a step back and just see what happens as far as India is concerned, instead of going
like the ambassador has been saying it, it is just natural in the realism world. The weaknesses of your opponent should be treated as an opportunity to cooperate and also to put down your point on paper. So what has happened in case of Pakistan is that we have very well registered the point that the rights of the Sikhs have been violated, rather the protection, let's say that, the sovereignty, and the state is involved in it. And the important point is whether it is Canadian national or not. The important is that the Canadian Prime Minister has clearly said that the Indian government is involved in it. So we should be focusing on that rather than picking up on Sikhs or others. That should be, because we don't want to be attached with anything, that happens inside India to other nationality. We are all for the human rights. This should be our agenda, because human rights, like our caretaker Prime Minister has also stressed, that human rights, climate, economy, and prosperity and the poverty reduction, these are the few points that Pakistan is moving forward. And we also have to move with the geoeconomics. Importantly for the region, just last point is that Pakistan has been stressing, again this government has stressed and called the international community to influence India to accept the Pakistan's offer of strategic restraint on conventional weapons and non-conventional, so that this whole concept of geoeconomic, the whole concept of interconnectivity within the region, and the CPEC and the BRI, and even the inclusion of India into this whole positive prosperity regime can be tapped well.
Do you think it's going to be, Brigadier Saab, do you think perhaps this, are asking India to perhaps, like Dr. Shabana is saying, to take a step back, the restraint on conventional warfare, conventional weapons, which is what the caretaker Prime Minister also talked about, is going to perhaps make some headway because of this incident? It seems to be a logical consequence of what India is suffering.
I think I slightly differ
okay.
previous two speakers, and the reason is that what India does to you. I think Modi from Red Fort Rampart had talked about Balochistan, and insurgency and how, and if you look at any news, any negative news, whether it's related to minorities, they pick it up and just blow it up. Here you have, I think, actually I would say Pakistan would be doing a favor, especially in the information domain, to highlight, even to communicate to let's say those 1.4 billion people in India. And mind you, in India it's actually a minority suppressing the majorities. If you look at Dalits, Muslims, Shudras, Sikhs and Christians, they form 77%, and they are all suppressed by the upper three castes. So, and this thing is now resonating. There is already a pushback from the liberals, like India Alliance formed by the Congress. So I am sure they are also thinking that how India's image has been tarnished. So we can definitely help the liberal India. On the question of, I think, terrorism and Hindutva ideology, if Prime Ministers mentioned it, and if the caretaker foreign ministers mentioned it, so it means that diplomatic line is very clear, and I think our state information people who do with information should follow that. So I feel there is a time for an aggressive posturing as far as Modi's RSS in Jeddah is concerned, but then of course highlighting to the liberal India that there is need for peaceful coexistence. I think there was a threat by one of the Indian thinkers for nuclear weapons against Canada. So look at look at their mindset that they are going to basically, although it's very, very absurd, I don't think so they have capability to do it. But I feel that Pakistan should go two-pronged approach. One is to the liberal India and the rest is to the Hindutva India, which is being led by Modi and RSS. And God forbid he comes, I think he is building up now this narrative for at least the cow belt to get 2/3 majority. But there are, if you look at three corners, northeast, northwest, including occupied Kashmir, Punjab, and from southern India, there is a pushback now. So I'm sure we should ally ourselves with the liberal India, which want a peaceful and inclusive India.
Do you think, Dr. Shabana, do you think that popularity as far as Modi is concerned, is it going to, what Brigadier Saab is saying, is it going to play positively? Is it going to have a negative impact? How do you look at it?
It's if you follow the initial trends, it's so horrific. I don't know what's wrong with the public perception out there is that whenever the gross human rights violation have occurred and continues to occur in Indian occupied Kashmir and even the irresponsible behavior versus minority during the COVID era, the popularity graph, the voting graph continue to rise, and one of the factors can be the economic rise of India, but I still dispute that. But again, I think that the media, like the Brigadier Saab had said, and so the maneuvering of the information domain within the country has been so much that there is a total blackout of the other worldview that should be seen, So they have not allowed the Pakistani movies, and others, they have also expelled the others artists who were working there. They have stopped showing the the dramas. Rather, they are showing. Of course, the people are seeing it through third channel as well.
But this is an extension of what they've done in a huge way in Kashmir, and now that it's happening within
so
India
there is an information blackout actually for the majority of the people, and somehow this mantra continues to rise. But what I see is that if it was 80-20, it's going to be 60-40 or 50-60, so it is going to be a balance has to be achieved. So let's see what side goes into it.
What about the G20? I mean, now in the background of the G20 having been held, its effect also, do you think it's dented that also?
Obviously, when we are talking of the, we have such respected ambassadors with us who are more exposed to the international diplomacy. We all know when an international actor, the major actor is dented by the security or others, it becomes a huge news rather than the 9/11, If it would have happened in somewhere in Nepal or somewhere, God forbid, here or others, it wouldn't have made much news. But this is very important because the way the Canada has, taken the response, obviously it's going to create and the image of India as the rising India. But on the human rights scale, it continues to be dented because we cannot ignore the Human Rights Watch reports. We cannot ignore the Amnesty International approach. We cannot ignore the US State Department report or the Geneva-based think tanks report. So,
but we have actually, and unfortunately, we have been ignoring all of those things. The world has, in a sense, Brigadier Saab, you have to agree, been looking the other way. This is just, one of those cases in point where I think they're being forced to see when it's happening in their house, when it's happening close to them. And with America, the US saying that, urging India to incorporate, share the proof, share the investigation, what kind of an effect do you think it will have? Because obviously when Justin Trudeau is talking about it, he has the proof. He has, you know, he's talking from 100% knowledge of what transpired.
Yeah, I think this is again very important to understand, especially the Canadian political dynamics, because one of the Sikh diaspora forms a very large portion, and politically if you look at that, I think even the alliance with Trudeau is of a Sikh, you know, I think I'm forgetting his name. So, and he's supposed to be projected as the next Prime Minister. So that's the kind of political power Sikhs hold, and these are the same, you know, I would say sons and daughters who migrated after 1984. After Operation Blue Star. So there is a political, I would say, strength available with the Sikhs. But the way India has actually responded, I would say that it's now actually going to start affecting Indian Punjab itself. They are banning their, you know, rappers, young boys who've been, let's say, singing for Sikh homeland, and then of course they are targeting, you know, Sikh community. So it's going to definitely permeate into Indian Punjab.
But what about their official stance at this time, you know, as far as India is concerned?
I think they have been very, very arrogant, because one, they are in the state of denial, and they are basically now saying that the counter argument is that basically Canada, they are saying actually Canada has become another Pakistan, and also that Canada is basically harboring terrorist organization. So this is, so I don't think so it's going to, you know, let's say mellow down very easily in near future. So if there is a hardened stance from India, and there is a hardened stance from Canada and its allies like Five Eyes, I think it's going to have a lot of problems for Modi.
Dr. Shabana, what about the lobby in the US as far as India is concerned within the West? I mean, of course, we can't ignore that there is a huge lobby there. They have, you know, a network. They have a, you know, the way that they project themselves, the way that they are looked at. Do you think it's going to play a role? Of course, they will do what they can.
Lobbying has always been a very important factor in the whole posture of building a great India, rising India, human face of India, cosmopolitan India, open for all India. So it is what, and one, if has a chance, myself and others, talking to the plethora of lobbyists, you know, the young lobbyists that are being funded first in the universities and then going into the circles of training into the lobbying institute, and then, you know, even the Indian diaspora, they play a huge role there. So this lobbying question to counter, as has been pointed out, you know, they are on the defensive. You know, and they're not willing to, you know, buy the argument of the Canadian government that they were involved in it. Rather, as has been pointed out, they will target the others. It's not us, it is the others who are doing it. So the lobbying is an approach. I think Pakistan has been very effective in the lobbying to the Pakistan cause around the world. But still, for Pakistan, we have to be more vigorous, more innovative and more forthcoming.
Is it a time to pick up the Kashmiri cause more zealously? You know, of course, there was a time that representatives were sent all over the world for the Kashmiri cause, for, you know, of course, the diaspora and the involvement of them. But overall, is it a time to perhaps pick up?
I think Kashmir is a Pakistan cause. Yeah. There is no second question about it. And we should be equating, I'm really a bit confused. Shall we be equating Kashmiri's cause only with the Khalistan cause? I don't think so. Kashmiri cause, you know, is maybe a global, something global, and that is recognized. They do have the Mir Wais have been to the United Nations General Assembly.
But Dr. Shabana, when we say, and I'll Brigadier Saab's input on this also, but when we say that, look, this is what India has been doing. Look what happened with their involvement within Pakistan, one, with the Kulbhushan Yadav case more recently. There have been others after also. And look what they're doing within India. Look what they've done to the Kashmiris. Look what they're doing to the Muslims. Look what they're doing to the minorities. And then we say that, look, now it's happening in Canada. It's simply that, right? It's an extension of what's
Yes, you can draw the parallels, you are right. But we also have to side by side maintain the genuinity of Kashmiri. I'm not saying that the Khalistan is not genuine, you know, because it is a recognized one of the oldest non-salt agenda on the UN. So this is something that has more to it.
And India is clubbing it as a territorial dispute, you know, it's something that this exposes that also, right?
Exactly.
Ji, Brigadier Saab, your input on this.
I think instead of equating it, but we can draw a lot of, I think, inspiration from the Khalistan model. Just quickly give you. Khalistan movement has 5-6 activists like Pannu, you know, Hardeep Singh Najjar who was killed, and I think they have some leaders in UK and Australia. these 5 to 6 activists actually have done more than what I am sorry to say, let's say Azad Kashmir government has done in information domain. Or I will not blame the let's say Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but imagine that you have a complete state, Azad Kashmir, you have government of Pakistan, and if you compare it with Khalistan in Indian Punjab, there is no government of Khalistan, but there are activists using social media and their diaspora. If you look at Pakistan and Kashmir, like in UK, it is 1.5 million Kashmiri Pakistani diaspora. So we can do a lot. I think social media allows you to actually bypass, you know, the way the views are suppressed in India. So you can always, and I think we could, I think, build upon what the Khalistan movement or referendum 2020 and onwards have done. So I think this is a time to now aggressively go for Kashmir cause and help our brethren, you know, gain independence in whatever time frame it comes.
Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. Thank you so much for being with us, Dr. Shabana Fayyaz. Thank you for joining us. Brigadier Waqar Hassan Khan, thank you for being with us. Maleeha Lodhi, thank you for joining us. Najm Us Saqib Saab, thank you for being with us today. Overall, of course, this exposes India in a way like never before. And of course, one has to concede that perhaps for the West, it's also a case in point where Pakistan's agitation, Pakistan's continuous pointing out of India's activities, not only within Kashmir, what's happening to the Muslims there, what's happening to the minorities within India, but also what India is doing in terms of interference as far as Balochistan is concerned, as far as through Afghanistan is concerned. These are all highlighted by this unfortunate event that happened, the Niger killing that happened. So overall, its effect cannot be ignored. Its effect exposes India in a manner like never before. Of course, we must agitate the Kashmiri cause as we've continued to do so, and perhaps this is the time to move a resolution in the UN like never before, and perhaps then the world can actually see the double standards Modi government has been perpetuating, the image, the facade that it continues to provide for us to see, that are all lies, that are all propaganda, even as we speak. Thank you so much for joining us today on Thursday.